Welcome to the Moonlight Shorts. This is the official audio home for the fiction of author Misty Hamilton Smith and the stories of Inkroot and Moonlight. From the surreal to the gritty, these tales explore every genre. Today's story, a trek through the high, thin air of the soul, where the wind strips away everything but the raw truth of why we keep climbing. The trail rose in a long, uneven line ahead of Mara, cutting through the stone in a way that suggested it had been carved by stubborn feet rather than intention. She paused at the base, letting her eyes follow the switchbacks until they disappeared into a band of shadow near the ridge. The air carried the sharp scent of cold rock, and the last of the daylight clung to the western slope as if reluctant to leave. She adjusted the strap of her pack and began the climb. The first stretch demanded more attention than strength. Gravel shifted beneath her boots, forcing her to place each step with care. The incline grew steeper, and the muscles in her legs tightened in a slow, steady burn. She kept her breathing even, though the air thinned faster than she expected. A blister had already begun to form on her heel, and each step sent a small pulse of heat through her foot. The mountain offered no rhythm to fall into. The path twisted without warning, narrowing in places where the rock pressed close. Shadows stretched across the trail, turning the ground into a patchwork of light and dark that made depth difficult to judge. Mara slowed her pace, letting her hand brush the stone beside her for balance. The surface felt cool and steady, a contrast to the heat building beneath her skin. Halfway up the slope, she stopped to steady herself. Her breath came in uneven pools, and she pressed her palm against a slab of granite that still held the warmth of the day. The wind swept down from the summit, carrying a colder current that slipped beneath her jacket. She closed her eyes for a moment, waiting for her heartbeat to settle. A memory surfaced without invitation. A small apartment she had left behind, the peeling wallpaper, the quiet that followed years of slammed doors. She remembered packing her belongings into a worn duffel bag, each item a reminder of a life she no longer wanted. The decision to leave had felt impossible until the moment she made it. After that, everything moved with a clarity she hadn't expected. The trail curved toward a narrow ledge. Mara placed her foot carefully, testing the ground before shifting her weight. The wind pressed against her back, urging her forward in a way that felt more like indifference than encouragement. She kept moving, her steps slow but deliberate. The ache in her legs deepened, but the pain felt honest. It reminded her she was still choosing her direction. As she climbed, the valley below shifted into muted colors. The last traces of daylight settled over the trees, softening the edges of the landscape. Mara paused again, leaning against a boulder while her breath steadied. The air tasted different up here, thinner but cleaner, as if the mountain filtered out everything unnecessary. She thought of the years she had spent rebuilding her life, the small victories that never felt like victories at the time, the mornings when she forced herself to keep going because the alternative was returning to a life that had carved her down to nothing. Every step on this mountain felt connected to those moments, as if the climb were a physical echo of everything she had endured. The trail rose again, steeper than before. Mara pushed upward, her movements slower but more controlled. Sweat gathered at the base of her neck, cooling in the wind. Her hands brushed the rock beside her for balance, the stone cold and steady beneath her fingertips. She focused on the next foothold, then the next, letting the rhythm return on its own. When she reached a small plateau near the ridge, she let her pack slide from her shoulders. The ground felt solid beneath her boots, and the air carried a quiet stillness that settled into her chest. She stood there for a long moment, watching the sky shift from blue to a deep, muted violet. The valley stretched below her in a wide sweep of shadow and fading color. The summit remained hidden behind the curve of the mountain. She didn't need to see it to understand the distance still ahead. The climb had taken more from her than she expected, but it had also given her something she hadn't noticed until now. Not clarity, not revelation, just a steadiness that came from effort rather than certainty. Mara lifted her pack again, settling the weight across her shoulders. The trail ahead rose in a quiet arc toward the darker part of the ridge. She tested the ground with her boot, waited for the wind to ease, and stepped forward. The gravel shifted, then held. She continued upward, not because the mountain invited her, but because she had already chosen the direction. You've been listening to an original story by Misty Hamilton Smith. This piece was originally published on the Inkroot and Moonlight blog. To read the written version or to support the author, please follow the link in the show notes. Thank you for listening.